So today, we're tackling the absolutely epic story of the Mughal Empire. We're talking about a 300-year saga of how a dynasty of warriors built one of the richest empires on Earth, created architecture that literally takes your breath away, and then just sort of vanished. It's an incredible story of rise and fall.
And just to wrap our heads around the timeline here, it all kicks off way back in 1526 with its founder, Babur. It hits this incredible peak under the Emperor Aurangzeb. But his death in 1707, well, that's the turning point. That's when the long, slow decline begins, all leading to the final chapter in 1857. It's a heck of a ride.
All right, so here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll see how this empire was even built. Then, we'll dive into its dazzling golden age. After that, we look at the moment it peaked and started to crack. Then comes the total chaos, and finally, we'll witness the fall of the very last emperor.
Okay, let's jump right in at the very beginning with the man who started it all, Babur. Now, this guy wasn't just another conqueror. He was a genuine military innovator who basically rewrote the rule book for warfare in India.
So, who exactly was Babur? Well, check out his family tree. He's a direct descendant of two of the most fearsome conquerors in all of history, Timur and Genghis Khan. That means he inherited this incredible military tradition straight from Central Asia, one that was all about speed, flexibility, and relentless attack.
And this is where it gets really interesting. You're looking at a complete mismatch of military tech and tactics. I mean, imagine you're a soldier in a traditional Indian army, and for the first time in your life, you hear the thunder of cannons on the battlefield. Babur brought gunpowder and mobile artillery up against these massive, slower armies that relied on war elephants and sheer numbers. It was new school versus old school, and the old school had no idea what was coming.
But here's the thing. It wasn't just about having better weapons. It was how he used them. He had these sophisticated tactics. His artillery would just shatter enemy lines and send the war elephants stampeding in panic. And then he'd unleash the tulagma, this brilliant flanking maneuver where his fast-moving cavalry would sweep around the enemy's sides and just completely envelop them. It was absolutely devastating, and it's how he won the key battles of Panipat and Kanwa against much larger forces.
And this quote, right here, shows Babur's real genius. He knew that winning on the battlefield was only half the struggle. He was also a smart politician. He worked to integrate the local rulers, turning enemies into allies. See, that's how you don't just conquer a place. That's how you actually build an empire that lasts.
So, from those hardcore military foundations, the empire grew into something truly spectacular. About 100 years later, under Emperor Shah Jahan, it entered this incredible golden age of mind-boggling wealth and cultural achievement.
To really get a handle on what Golden Age means, just look at that number, 25%. At its peak, the Mughal Empire controlled a quarter of the entire world's economy. A quarter. To put that into perspective, that is a bigger slice of the global pie than the United States has today. And that kind of wealth, it fuels some pretty amazing things. And all that cash was poured into a massive architectural boom. Emperor Shah Jahan wasn't just a ruler, he was a passionate architect, and he drove this new, elegant style that was obsessed with perfection, harmony, and above all, symmetry. And you can see the hallmarks of his style everywhere. This almost fanatical devotion to perfect mirror image symmetry, that iconic combination of gleaming white marble and deep red sandstone. And of course, the incredibly detailed floral carvings that look like they're literally blooming out of the stone, all done by thousands of master artisans. It all comes together in his ultimate masterpiece, the Taj Mahal, a tomb for his wife that became a symbol of this incredible era.
But you know how these stories often go? It's right at the absolute height of its power that the cracks start to appear. The reign of Shah Jahan's son, Aurangzeb, is a story of wild contradictions, a time when the empire was bigger than ever, but was also planting the seeds of its own doom.
This really lays out the paradox, doesn't it? On one hand, Aurangzeb expands the empire to its absolute largest size, but on the other, his non-stop 27-year war in the Deccan completely bankrupted the state. At the same time, his rigid religious policies angered huge segments of the population, sparking massive revolts from rising powers like the Marathas and the Sikhs. Now, some historians see him as a very capable and pious ruler, but there's no denying these policies created deep, lasting division.
And this quote just perfectly captures the tragedy of it all. His conquests were a Pyrrhic victory, meaning he won, but the cost of winning was so huge it was almost like a defeat. He bled the empire dry of men and money, creating the perfect storm that was just waiting to explode the second he was gone.
So when Aurangzeb finally dies, the empire doesn't just decline, it shatters. It collapses into a century of chaos, with civil wars, invasions, and rebellions literally tearing the empire to pieces from the inside out.
So let's break down this collapse. It wasn't just one thing, it was a domino effect. First, you had constant wars between princes fighting for the throne, which weakened the government. That weakness encouraged rebellions all over the empire. The internal chaos then invited foreign invaders to come in and raid. And all of this instability created a power vacuum that European powers, especially the British, were more than happy to step in.
And if you want a perfect snapshot of the chaos at the top, get this. In the year 1719 alone, count them, 4 different emperors sat on the throne. One after another, they were put in power and then kicked out. The central authority was just gone.
So what was really going on? Well, the emperor wasn't calling the shots anymore. Powerful nobles, especially a parent known as the Syed brothers, were the real kingmakers. They were the ones installing and getting rid of emperors whenever they felt like it, turning the once all-powerful ruler into their personal puppet.
And that brings us to the final, somber act of this incredible story, where the last embers of a once mighty empire finally go out.
By the end of the 18th century, being the Mughal emperor was a title and not much else. His actual power barely stretched beyond the walls of his palace in Delhi. He was living under the protection of other powers, first the Marathas, and then, crucially, the British East India Company.
The story that began with the thunder of Babur's cannons ends right here. After the massive Indian Rebellion of 1857, the British had had enough. They officially abolished the empire, took the last emperor, Bahadur Shah II, and exiled him to Burma. And just like that, a dynasty that had lasted for over 300 years was over.
Which really leaves you with this one big question, right? The story of the Mughals is this powerful, timeless lesson in how fragile even the greatest empires can be, how they can be undone by costly wars, by internal divisions, and by a simple failure to adapt. It's a story from the past that, honestly, still feels incredibly relevant today.